Welcome to Hack Circus. This week I talked to Helen Keen, a friend of mine who is a brilliant science comedian and entertainer. She's had a Radio 4 series called It Is Rocket Science that you may well have come across, and if not then you should look it up. It'll be around somewhere, I'm sure. She's also a live performer and a stand-up and has put on many shows relating to space. She's amazing, she's so funny, really intelligent. This episode appears to be slightly shorter than some other ones we've had lately, but bear in mind Helen does talk very quickly, so I think word count is probably in excess of some of the longer ones we've had. I must apologise for the background noise again in this episode. It's music this time in a cafe. It didn't sound like it does now on my headphones when I was recording it, but I've learned my lesson on that one. No more cafes playing music. Helen's got a book coming out this Christmas, which we talk about a little bit on this episode, and it's about the science of Game of Thrones. It sounds like it's going to be really good fun, so have a look for that one. If you're enjoying this podcast, please give us a star rating and or a review on iTunes. It all helps. Hack Circus is also a magazine and an event series. If you go to hackcircus.com, you can find out more about the project, subscribe to the magazine and so on. I had a really good time catching up with Helen. I hope you enjoyed the episode too. I first came across Helen when she was touring an amazing show about rocket science and taken it to Edinburgh and it was a smash hit. And subsequently, was that what you feel launched your career, that show?
What did you have before that? Was there anything I didn't know I hadn't heard about?
No, I didn't really, because I just sort of started doing stand-up before that, and kind of I did sort of slightly weird stand-up about sort of history and science and kind of weird things in there, which are not the most obvious stuff to do for science. But yeah, so I think it was really that show that kind of lifted things off for me, I suppose.
When did you start doing stand-up? Were you always like performing as a child or a younger person?
No, I was like the most unperforming child ever. I think I was incredibly quiet and never was really a performing child. So I think I probably always wanted to be and always kind of imagined it would be a wonderful thing, but no, I was probably quite a noisy kid at home, but no, I was very, very quiet the rest of the time. So it was really something that I sort of started doing. I sort of got into drama to kind of be a bit more sociable and be a bit more kind of normal and be able to sort of be more of a kind of chatty person, and then it sort of came out of that really, because I don't think I was ever really going to be Meryl Streep on the kind of acting front. So kind of if you're doing comedies, it was back then, I think it's a lot more difficult now, but back then it was relatively easy to get started and relatively easy just to sort of write something and turn up to a pub and perform it to like 5 people or whatever and just feel like you'd actually done something with your time. So that was probably easier then. Probably not like that now.
I don't know, maybe you're being too modest. Maybe it was harder then.
It was kind of felt like I think you sort of feel like it was this sort of goal, because comedy now, everybody, I think it's much more of a professional thing now, comedy, that people go into it expecting to make money and expecting to have a career and expecting for it to be like a thing, whereas I think I was just sort of starting sort of back in 2006, 2007, when it was still kind of, there wasn't a lot of comedy on telly, and there certainly wasn't any sort of science comedy and that kind of thing. That certainly wasn't a kind of particularly a thing at all back then, so it was all a bit more, just do whatever, rather than feeling like now it just all feels very regimented and it all feels like you can do, there's so many, whatever niche you're in, there are so many other people in the same niche now, whereas back then it was sort of all a bit more, it was all fields back then, I think is what I'm saying.
Well, there was an interesting article in The Guardian by Simon Munnery recently about this, like, I wonder if everybody sort of feels like that about just because of the pace of change maybe, but he was saying like alternative comedy used to be a thing where you could just write a set and turn up at any pub, and there was so much of a market for it. Basically there was a broad market, but it was kind of a, you might be playing a small room, but he said you could do 3 or 4 sets a night, just moving around London, because everybody wanted something, there was everyone wanted a bit of weird live entertainment, and that's kind of, like you say, maybe just become more crystallised into this mainstream thing now.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think the alternative comedy, I think that sort of had changed. I don't know what sort of period. I guess maybe he's talking about the 90s or...
Yes, well, kind of 80s even.
Yeah. So I think it had sort of maybe changed kind of a bit more recently. But yeah, I think as I say, I don't know, it does feel like it's an odd thing when you see, it sounds very prejudiced thing to say, but when you see people from like public school going into a career option, you kind of go, okay, there's clearly money in that, there's clearly the option of success, whereas it used to be much more of a kind of weirdos and losers going into it, really. But, yes.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that recently in terms of like where is the alternative now? Like, where do you know, not kind of that there's anything intrinsically better about it, but that you do need an alternative. You need like it's like you need two political parties. You need someone who's kind of presenting something else, and that there needs to be space for that somehow. But I guess there are still weird cabaret acts and stuff you come across.
There are, and there are people who do kind of mainstream stuff. I mean, I remember really early on in sort of my career going and seeing somebody like say John Maloney at Banana Cabaret, which Banana Cabaret is a mega sort of mainstream venue, but he was doing all kinds of weird stuff. He was like talking about Wittgenstein and all this kind of very strange stuff, and I was seeing him do the same sort of thing at Jongleurs as well. And I think, you know, some people just have this slightly offbeat quality to them, even when ostensibly what they're doing is very mainstream. So I think there's always kind of been this sort of crossover, and then other sort of kind of alternative acts maybe are approaching it in quite a sort of traditional, quite a sort of thought out, kind of slightly calculating way. So I think there's kind of this, there's always this kind of crossover. But there doesn't seem to be the same kind of degree of completely crazy, like sort of Malcolm Hardy stuff that was going on in the 80s and stuff. There isn't, I don't think there's really an equivalent of that necessarily now.
No, I don't. Did you have kind of 90s, like when I was a child of the 90s, or teenager of the 90s, it was all like listening to the Armando Iannucci show and Chris Morris's radio stuff and all that. That was
Lionel Nimrod. I was a big Lionel Nimrod.
Oh, Lionel Nimrod's Inexplicable World.
Yes, I love that. It's a massive influence on what I've tried to do something.
Really?
So, yeah, I love that show. Yeah. It's kind of very, very weird. Yes. But yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, radio. I suppose because we didn't have the internet to the same degree then, so we were kind of radio was kind of there was CFAX. CFAX was quite good. I liked CFAX. But so I guess. Yeah, I think I was similar, and kind of listening to that sort of thing, and it was just and thinking, you never think at the time you'll be doing anything like that, or you'll never be able, because it doesn't feel like it's you can't imagine it. It just seems to exist in this bubble, and it's sort of transmitted, and you don't actually think that there are people making this and people kind of doing that. It's kind of weird, isn't it?
It's funny, you don't think of it as a potential. No, whereas now it's podcasting, and everybody wants to be a broadcaster, and it's But exactly, it was like a really exciting other world.
If it might as well have been happening on another planet or something, because when you switch on the television you didn't actually think there was, especially I think maybe if you're in London and you're this sophisticated, but as you say, if you're sort of provincial like we were, then it just seems like it's kind of being beamed to you from some impossibly distant galaxy of wonderfulness.
It was so, I remember the first time I went to the Edinburgh Festival, I was I think about 14 and went to the Fringe, and just all these people suddenly became real, and it was like, oh my god, they're like, Peter Bainham actually exists and he's doing a show on the Fringe.
That must have been incredible, actually.
So good. And we booked, I remember especially with Pete Bainham, we were so excited about it, me and my brother. We booked the tickets like about 3 months in advance, going, it's going to sell out, he's on the radio, it'll sell out. And we got them like 4 people in the audience. No one had heard of
Pete Bainham is very amazing though.
He is.
Kind of share your admiration there. Yeah, that's kind of, yes. Yes, that's right.
Did you go to Edinburgh before you started performing then?
No, so I had a similar thing, but then I was in my 20s, which is less sophisticated than you were kind of allowed if you were 14. Whereas I was just kind of walking around Edinburgh, just like, Edinburgh, the first time you go, I think it's kind of really sad, because I think if you're in the comedy industry and you do, that's having a twerp saying that, but if you in a very small way, if you're in the comedy industry and then you sort of end up doing a show, and then the sort of realities of it, and the kind of fact that you can have sort of bad days and good days, and all that kind of thing comes through. But I think the first time you go to Edinburgh, and Edinburgh's such a beautiful city, and it's also magical, and the fireworks and all this kind of stuff, but just the fact that there are all these shows on, and it is mind-blowing. I mean, I think just the magic of that first time. And then I sort of knew some people who'd already started performing and who were a lot further along than me, and a lot of them were sort of, they'd get very frustrated about it, and I think, what are you talking, this is all wonderful, and then of course you go and do your own show and you get very, you know exactly what it's like, and you get frustrated about stuff, and you get annoyed, and you don't get reviewed by this person or whatever, and it's kind of frustrating. But the first time, I think I had that too, of that just magic of, look, all these people are real, and there's pictures of them everywhere, and then we're walking past them in the street, and you can go and you can pay money and see them. It's kind of that is kind of amazing.
And that's how people feel about you now.
Yes. Yes, that's definitely true.
You must, when you're in Edinburgh though, do you get people coming up going, "It's Helen Keen," and sort of, you must
like really weirdly, but only in like Radio 4 audiences. So like you kind of get people and they'll kind of come and like say quote stuff from the show, and you go, "Oh my god, yes!" And it's kind of, and then I think I sort of scare them away by being more excited and more like, because I really want them to be kind of like really, I don't just be like, yeah, whatever. I just want like, oh my god, that's so cool that you listen to that. I never imagined anyone listens to it, so it's really amazing that you clearly do, because it's like I've given you a test and you've like quoted something at it from me. So so I probably end up, it probably ends up being the reversal, where they kind of come up all enthusiastic and then they're like, yeah, I've got to go now because I'm just talking to them too much or something. It's nice meeting you, and they're sort of backing away. So it's supposed to be the other way around. It doesn't happen very often, but yes. It's kind of weird though, because a lot of people do listen to Radio 4, so you forget that.
Do you get people recognising you by your voice?
Oh gosh, no, I don't think I've only ever been recognised when I've been in like a situation when I've borderline had like a sticker on my forehead saying my name or whatever. I don't think I would. No, I don't think I've had anyone go when I've like rung up to book a ticket or something and someone's going, "Isn't that Radio 4's Helen Keen?" No, that would be very weird. No, fortunately not. What about you? Because you're obviously a big podcaster. Do people ever go, "Hang on a minute"?
A bit like you. Like it's happened a couple of times when I've been in a situation where I would expect those kind of people to be around. Like one time was at the Brighton Maker Fair a couple of years ago.
Oh, well, that is prime Layla fan territory, I would imagine.
I don't think they even knew my name. They were like, "It's you off that podcast. Like, just your voice. Hang on, your voice. Keep talking." that was quite exciting. But I think it gives a sort of false sense of like inflation or something, because it never happens again. Like,
well, that's what happens when you go to Edinburgh though, because people do, and I think that you see why people, because everyone goes, "Oh, comedians just become so intolerable at the Edinburgh Fringe," but you can see, because that's what happens, because people have been to see your show and then you're walking down the street and then people do stop you and go, "Oh, we were in your show the other day and it was really good," and it's like, "Oh," and you know, and so that's kind of a bit like you get this sort of small taste of what it must be like to be properly famous, and also, and then you go, "Oh, there's pictures of me all over," and then you sort of forget that you're paying like £5,000 to anybody, any random mad person could pay someone £5,000 to have pictures of themselves stuck up everywhere. It doesn't actually mean anything. Remember that, people in Edinburgh. But so I think there's that sort of slightly weird taste of, oh, this is, you know, but then you go back to reality and, you know. Weird to want to be famous, though, wouldn't it? I mean, to want to have people coming up to you in the street, that would be weird. So I think it's kind of, you get a little taste.
I do kind of want it a little bit. I think it would be quite nice, like just a little bit, just make you feel a bit special. You're feeling down, and you're like, "Oh, no one appreciates me and all the work I put into my life." And then occasionally someone goes, I appreciate you. I remember that thing you did 10 years ago.
I suppose so.
I think that'd be quite nice.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want people kind of, like, if we were doing this interview now, you wouldn't want someone with like a long lens kind of photo.
No, not at that level.
No, I think that would be kind of weird, and then you couldn't like do anything. That would be kind of strange.
It's very odd. I think that really famous people like Taylor Swift live in a completely different world. Like it's you know, like everything they do all day long is for completely different reasons and a completely different way to how normal people live.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, isn't it? And then every now and again, and then there's always these sort of cycles. I think that's the thing I think is so scary about being a famous person, is that people love you 1 minute, like Taylor Swift's such a good example, and then kind of hate you, and then love you again, and then hate you, and then you become this sort of weird hate figure, and then everyone goes, "Oh no, you've released a really good thing," and that must be very odd.
Well, that's due to your identity, to the kind of. Yeah, you have to construct a sort of false identity for everybody to play with, like give back to the public, and then kind of hold something back, and then the pressure of holding back, you know, how would that work? Wasn't it even just, I mean, you probably found some, but I know with sort of comedy you get that a little bit where, you know, you kind of, if you have like a really good, it's a very weird thing, because if you have like a good gig, people do want to come up to you and they stand closer to you and they're really kind of much closer, and there's lots of like, and you know, and then if you have a bad gig, it's the absolute opposite, that nobody, even people who love you, will not go near you. People don't, it's like people will actually try to avoid touching you. It's almost like it's a sort of contagious thing. The fact that I'm spending longer talking about this aspect of it should not be taken as an
indication of how my comedy career went. But so it's kind of, and I think it's just that total, you have to treat those two imposters just the same. If you believe people, when people tell you you're brilliant and you're really funny, if you believe that, you also have to believe people when they're just like, oh dear, well, everybody has off days, or the classic, I think you're very brave. I couldn't do it. You're so brave. And you go, and the implication of you're so brave because you're clearly not talented, but you just keep doing it. And so that's the brave, you know. It's like, it's kind of, I think you just have to kind of, so even on that level, even on that really kind of micro level of just like anybody at all starting to do stand-up will find that I just think, that's kind of quite a strange way of seeing yourself reflected by other people, I think. And you just have to,
Do you feel like you're quite, you kind of give a lot of your real self in a performance, or have you kind of found a way of like holding something back? Because I feel like you're very much the same on stage as you are in real life. Like, you're very natural, and that's what's appealing about you, is that you feel like you're getting an honest performance, whereas some other performers, maybe it's a taste thing, but I don't find it as appealing, knowing that they're not, it seems false somehow, and you can't, there's something stopping them from connecting with the audience like that. But
I think it's a really weird, fascinating thing, because I think that's ultimately sort of what you want to do. And I don't know how you feel about it, because obviously you do performing and public speaking too, but you're always sort of kind of trying to be yourself, but at the same time it's kind of a little bit like, you know, you've still got something that you're trying to do, so you don't want to go, oh God, I was so miserable earlier, I had like 5 chalk ices before I came on, and now I'm just feeling a bit sick, to be honest. I mean, you can sort of necessarily, whatever, not that I do that, but that's never happened. So I think it's kind of, I think you are sort of, well, for me anyway, I'm just sort of trying to kind of be yourself, but at the same time, you've got to sort of try and develop, I guess, some kind of membrane in case it's kind of not going that well, so there's something sort of protecting you, so you're not completely, but I think that's one of the things I think is really interesting on stage, that when you actually see somebody, you know, being a real person and having vulnerability on stage, because that's what I think makes people watchable and makes people, whatever they're doing, whether they're sort of speaking or performing or any kind of thing, I think, as you say, you want something, you want to feel that you're watching something real on some level. You don't want to feel like it's just this sort of shiny Teflon kind of, everything's bouncing off it kind of creation, I guess. I don't know, how do you feel about that?
I think the thing you said about you've got a job to do, like you go up there and you're trying to get across that message, and I find that especially with comedy audiences, they're slightly just waiting for the next joke, so it sort of doesn't quite matter how you get there. It's like you can kind of, as long as you sort of I feel like the less you think about yourself on stage, the better generally, and then it kind of, you come across anyway. Like, you can't really control that so much. But the one really good thing I read, which is probably the most helpful thing in terms of, I don't really get nerves on stage anymore very much, unless I'm ill or something. I don't really feel like shaky and everything. But one thing that really helped me was reading this, I think it was a book about, it might have been a book about comedy actually, and they just said, remember, the audience wants you to be a safe pair of hands. Like, they want you to take charge, and you kind of adopt this like parental role and go in there and go, everything's fine, look, I'm here. You know,
it's so straight. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I think that you forget that, because sometimes you feel like people, you know, they're not sure, and sometimes you get a bit of an uncertainty vibe from people. But ultimately, nobody wants to go, oh God, we had this horrible evening where we went to see this talk or this performance or whatever, and it was just awful. You know, people want it to be good, and you just have to kind of tap into that, I guess. But that is the thing that you forget. You feel like you're facing off against these people, and they're watching you, they're going to watch you fail, and no, they're not. No, not at all, I think.
Do you still do live gigs? Are you doing stuff at the moment?
I'm not doing that much because I've been writing a book, Layla. So I'm sort of going to do some more live stuff for that, and probably get back to doing sort of live stuff. But I've kind of had a few other things going on this year and stuff. But so I hope so. It's kind of, I do still find it nerve-wracking. I mean, once I'm actually on stage, I'm okay. But beforehand, sometimes I would just be like, I feel like I'm going to my own execution. This is ridiculous.
Oh, God.
So I do still get really nervous. Sometimes not at all, but sometimes I just do get very, because I sort of, it just always feels like it feels like quite an arrogant thing to do, to go and stand on stage and say, yes, I'm the only person facing this way. You should all stop with your conversations with your friends and listen to what I have to say. So it feels like quite a big responsibility to kind of be sufficiently good to merit the degree of attention that you're kind of demanding by standing there. So I think I find that a bit nerve-wracking still.
How do you cope with it when you do feel nervous? Do you have any kind of
shock ISIS. Shock. No. I think you just have to get. And the weird thing is, you kind of. I guess it's like if you jump out of planes for a living or something, that you can't, it's terrifying, and then you just go, this again, and you get so used to standing there and, seeing a few people and the lights on and you just go, it's just this again, I've been through this so many times, and, so the nerves kind of stop then, but yeah, I think you just kind of, I don't know.
I think that jumping out of planes analogy is quite good, because it is like, you literally just go, I'll just get on stage. And you just do it. Yeah. Like, you just kind of, everything's trying to stop you, and you just kind of go, oh, here now, here's the microphone, okay, right.
Do you ever do that before you're about to go on? Do you ever get that thing where you kind of almost forget that you're going to do it, and then you suddenly go, gosh, it's me, and I've got to be the one who does that, and I still don't understand how that happens, because I've done this quite a lot of times, and yet I'm still kind of, wow, that's actually me who's got it, and it's so weird from going from being the person who's sort of sitting in the dark with everybody else to being the person who's kind of lit on stage. It's still kind of a weird, I think it's a kind of weird transition. It's kind of a weird going from this sort of two different states, and also as well, if you even find this as well, if you're kind of doing stuff where you're writing a lot and it's very sort of insular and very introverted, and then you're going and doing this completely opposite sort of thing, and that kind of flow of stuff, I think, is quite. So I'm making very weird hand gestures here, which is not good for a podcast. But yeah, that kind of odd transfer, I guess, is kind of weird.
It's a totally different skill, and the writing that you think in your head, you're sort of performing it as you're reading it, going, well, this is how this is going to work. They're going to love that bit. They're going to, and then when you do it, it's completely different.
Yeah. And sometimes you literally, and that's the amazing thing, if you can actually find something in that moment on stage, and then it's kind of, or you get to that point with the audience where you kind of, they just completely trust you, and you can just say any old, and they'll go, yes, we can find something funny about that, and we can sort of whatever. But it's very odd business, isn't it? It's an odd thing to do.
But you mentioned your book a little while ago, and I was sort of going to ask you,
obliged to do that. Yes,
I was going to sort of segue through to this by saying something about how have you found brokering the urge to be creative and make brilliant things with the kind of the professional side of being a performer and a writer. Like, do you find yourself, as I do, massively favouring the creative outpouring of ideas at the expense of actually pursuing the professional angle, or do you, I don't know, like, you seem to be able to do quite a good balance of both.
I think I've tried, just that's because I've been skint for so long, I think that I kind of just thought I've got to do something about this is getting ridiculous, but I'm really old, I ought to be able to make at least the average salary for a person in this country, but I think it's kind of, I think I think I'd done all these kind of slightly off the wall things where I kind of felt like, oh, this is a very original idea or whatever, and then with the book that I was doing, I was actually working with someone else's ideas in lots of ways. So I was, working on this kind of made up universe that is the Game of Thrones universe, but also talking to scientists and people who are working in quite sort of interesting or peculiar, to me anyway, areas of science to kind of bring those into this sort of world. So yeah, and initially I think I maybe thought that sort of maybe wasn't as creative, or was creative in a different way, but then I think I've kind of really enjoyed doing it actually. So obviously there's stressful moments, writing a book isn't all, it's not everybody wants to do it for some reason. If you ask people what they want to do, everybody wants to write a book.
Oh God, why?
And I think exactly, it's so hard, it's really hard.
The worst thing.
It's really hard, and it sort of destroys you at times, and it's brilliant, but at the same time, I don't know why that's the thing everyone wants to do, but only because they don't really understand what's involved, I suppose. I don't think I did before I started. I don't think you do before you start. So yeah, but I think so. There are always these ways to sort of try and be creative and try and be, even within this quite sort of confines of not having just come up with this, because that's something I always try and do, and I'm sure sort of the same in your projects, where you almost build the whole world. It's this little thing, like I did rocket science, and it was this relatively tiny little radio show, but I kind of had this whole sort of backstory to it, and it was me, and I was doing this homemade, space radio show, and it was kind of the funniness of that was that, you think of massive series like Wonders of the Universe or Cosmos or whatever, that are these beautiful big budget, and the idea of trying to do something about space where you don't have any visuals and it's all kind of done yourself, and so that was kind of my whole kind of pages and pages of notes and backstory on that. Whereas when you're doing something like writing like Game of Thrones as did in the book, then someone else has done all that work for you, so that's kind of quite a sort of change there. I can't remember where I was going with this now.
Well, you were talking about the using somebody else's material, and so is the book about is it like the science of Game of Thrones? Is it? That's what I'm getting from what you said.
Oh,
so
sorry,
far.
yeah, I didn't really explain it very well. Yeah, kind of it is. So it's kind of things like, I mean, there's sort of, like for just one example, there's sort of really, as probably lots of people know, that really recently there's been lots of kind of quite exciting advancements in genetics and genetic manipulation. So there's this thing called CRISPR, and there's also the Human Genome Right project, where you're starting to look at doing more creative things with the genome of people and animals, and because obviously when the first genomes were mapped and it all seemed very exciting, and then nothing really happened and we didn't really cure all diseases or whatever. But now I think there's this sort of maybe this kind of point where making, I think there was an essay that was written by some bioethicists at the end of last year, all about how it might be possible one day to use something like CRISPR to basically create a dragon, create a unicorn, create these fantastical creatures. And there's somebody, even though there are lots of ethical issues around that, you might at some point get some billionaire who wants to have an amazing party for their kids, and he's just going to go, what's better at that party than dragons and unicorns? And so somebody might do that, and that might happen maybe within the next 10-20 years, because this sort of technology, it's not some sort of esoteric thing. It's something that undergraduates and people are already using for projects. So obviously in genetics it's incredibly complicated, and I'm not going to try and explain it because I don't understand it. I think lots of people who work in it don't understand it, but yeah, so it's just kind of trying to, I guess, use Game of Thrones as a sort of jumping off point to kind of look at these more sort of weird and wonderful things. And also just like there's so much kind of in the kind of not cliches exactly, but the kind of staples of fantasy literature, like making a sword out of a meteorite, and you always think, well, could you actually do that? Because meteorites are kind of a bit Kinder Egg-ish, and that they might be, what's in them might be good, but it might be quite dross as well. So how would you do that kind of thing? So I spoke to people like astronomers and blacksmiths and people who'd actually tried using the metal from meteorites to make swords and kind of stuff. So that was kind of quite a sorry.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love it. No, it's great. So what's the book called?
The Science of Game of Thrones.
Perfect.
It's very much what it does on the cover is what's inside. It's not, I haven't given it a weird title.
And when's it out?
In the UK, it's out on the 22nd of September, but it's also coming out in the US, which is quite exciting. But that's in October and various other places as well. But I don't know. They're abroad. I don't know if that's all I know.
Have you seen the cover yet?
Yes, I have. We've got a little animated GIF for the UK cover, and we've got a completely different cover for the US one, which is a guy with his head in his hands, which is kind of how I felt quite all the time when I was writing the book. But so that's kind of a very different feel. So that's been quite interesting. Yeah, how books are kind of sort of packaged in different countries. You probably had that as well, where it's just kind of that's different to how how it is over here. But,
so so you say it's an animated GIF. Is it going to be a print book as well as a Kindle?
Oh yeah. It's going to be. Sorry, no. It's just we had the cover and the Ben Summers, who did the illustrations. He's a very great illustrator. He did a little animation. So we have these scientists who are sort of standing all over the head of a dragon and doing things to the dragon, and it's quite. I like it anyway. So
So as long as you like it,
I like it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But hopefully other people will.
Oh, amazing! Sounds great. And it sounds exactly like the sort of thing that will go well. Like it's people love science books. They love TV.
So yeah, I mean you can never tell, though, can you?
You can never tell. Yeah. It depends on various things, doesn't it, and the way it's marketed. Yeah. It generally doesn't depend on what you've actually written inside the book, so at least you'll know it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just, you can never get, that's the thing as well, I guess, that you learn when you do something kind of that's sort of beyond just you performing on stage. Even when it's just you performing on stage, but it's such a team effort, and you kind of get very sort of, you can't be this sort of artist in your tower kind of, sort of pacing up and down, holding your head, whatever. There is everything, there are lots of other people involved, and it's always a kind of team thing, so you just have to kind of, go with that, I guess, and enjoy the aspects of that. So
amazing. So did you watch Game of Thrones before you wrote the book? Did you have to? Were you already a fan?
I was a big fan. So I wrote, how it happened, I wrote ages ago. I wrote something for SFX magazine about they asked me to do that, about the science of Game of Thrones, and then and then it was so much work, to be honest, that I decided to do a live show that was also about that, and then that was I did that with Ian Simmons and the Centre for Life in Newcastle, and then that ended up leading to sort of more work and then the book, and so so that was kind of all kind of happened in a slightly sort of random way. But I was kind of a fan, and I'd read the books and I liked the TV show, so I was kind of and I kind of like George R. R. Martin's other stuff as well. I've been reading some of that recently, that he's written quite a lot of other sort of science fiction and stuff, and he's obviously, I think there is a lot of stuff, because I've sort of written about things like I don't know, genetics in the book. I think it talked about a bit, and stuff like parasitology as well, which is really interesting, quite trendy area at the moment. And when you read his other stuff, he's clearly interested in those things, and he's clearly sort of drawing on those things, I think, a little bit as well, even though I don't think you can do this sort of thing of being very literal and sort of saying, well, that's not, like people do. There's a sort of vaguely genetics-y plot line, I won't spoil it, in Game of Thrones about the former king and his children, and lots of people have gone, but that isn't how genetics works, whereas of course it's in a parallel universe, so it could be how genetics works in their parallel universe. So I haven't tried to sort of take it apart and just be like, but this is wrong, because that would just be silly, because it's a fantasy book. So yeah.